concept is being called as a nesting of member function. So this is the example where in which the private under the private access specifier. So there are two member function. First one is being called as setup A. The second one is being called as setup set underscore B, and both are being getting invoked from the function which is being exposed to the outside world, and that is what it is being called as a get values. So this is what we have discussed in the previous class itself. So in the today's class we will discuss about the different access specifier. So the data hiding is one of the important feature of a object oriented programming, which allows the preventing the function of a program to access directly the internal representation of a class type. Now, what it is trying to tell is that the way we have discussed structure, so in the structure, so the whatever data members that you are going to define, those are being by default access to the structure variable. But so there is no concept of data hiding in the structure which we have studied in the C programming language. Now, in contrast to that, so when we have been already jumped into the object-oriented programming paradigm, there is one feature which is being called as the data hiding. So, which is being considered as a very important feature by which it does not allow the data member to be directly exposed to the outside world. So if any value setting needs to be done, then it can be done with the virtue of a member function. So that is what it is being the first statement it is trying to tell here. So therefore the access restriction so to the class member is going to be defined or is going to be specified with the labeled public or private or protected. So this is what needs to be defined within the class. Then we will look at it, so what's going to happen if member variable or the member function is being defined within this. So the keyword which we are going to what we discussed now, that is the public, private and protected. So this is what has been called as the access specifier. So and access specifier means that means whatever code or whatever variable that you have defined under this access specifier, so that is what is going to work. Okay, now let's look at it. A class can have multiple public, protected and the private label section. So each section remain in effect until the either another section label or the closing right braces of the class body is being given. So what it is trying to tell, so this is a default, this is this is one example is being given. So in this example, so the three access specifier has been mentioned here. So that means what it is trying to tell. So there is a public one. So whatever will come under this, so the public members go here. Whatever comes up in the protected, so that is what has been come here. Then whatever comes under private, this is what has been comes here. So what this statement is trying to tell here is that so each section remains in effect. That means the code which you are going to write it over here, that is going to be effect until either another section. That means in this case there is another section labeled which has been come across, that is what is being called as the protected. And hence whatever you have written between the public and the protected, that is what will be treated under the public access specifier. That is one. The second thing is telling that or the closing braces of the class body is being seen. Now come to the private one. So in this the private one, so we do not have any further access specifier. So in this case, whatever code that has to come under here, so that code will be terminated or there is a closing right brace for the class. So you can see there is a braces has been written here and there is a semicolon has been written here. So that means the code which has been written under the private access specifier will be only treated under this. Okay, so is this concept is being clear at a very high level on what is meant by the access specifier? Is this clear to all of you on what is meant by access specifier?
Yes, sir.
Okay, then we will look at it with an example here. All the class members declared under public will be available to everyone. That means the data member and the member function which is going to be declared under the public can be accessed by other classes too. So that means what it is trying to tell? It is trying to tell that so the way we are being creating an object and accessing the data member and also the member variable in the similar fashion, we can also see that if the instance or the object of a circle is being passed an argument to a another class, then also it is what is going to worked out. So I will write it down a code of snippet to let you understand that how it can be accessed by other classes too. But before that, let's just quickly jump into this code itself. So the public member of a class can be accessed by anywhere in the program using the direct member access operator, which is being called as the dot operator with the object of that class itself. So in this case, what has been done? So we have created a class called as the circle, and this circle is having only one access specifier, and that is what is been called as a public here. So under the public access specifier, we have something called as a double here, and then also we have a member function which is being called as the compute area. That means this is what is being calculating the area of a circle. Okay, so this is what is being a class declaration. Then the second thing is that, I mean, after that, so there is a main function here. So in the main function, what we will do, we'll create an object of a class. So we have created obj, which is nothing but representing an object of type called as the class circle. Then since the radius is being exposed to the outside world, that means using the dot operator, which is being also called as the direct member access operator. So we have just put some values here. That is what has been called as a 5.5. Then we have used the cout statement just to flush it out that what is the value which is being associated to the radius data member. Then finally, we are just going to call the function which is being called as the compute underscore area. Then this is what is going to be executed here. So is this example is clear to everyone? Is this example is clear
Yes,
to?
sir.
Okay. Now what you will do, we will look at how it can be accessed by other classes too. Okay. So for this, I will just write down a piece of code here. Assume that this class is being exist here. So the class which has been written here. So let me copy this. Okay, so I have written this function here. Then what you will do, I will write a another class which is being called as the compute. Okay, then in the compute function, what you will do under the public access specifier. Okay, then we will write something called as a void calculate. So in this case, this is what is going to take a argument of type something like this. Then what we can do, we can just calculate it something called as the c dot c out, then we'll write c dot compute area. Then what we will do, we'll go to the main function. So in the main function, what was being written there, so we will write the same thing there. So we will create a circle C here, then we will create a object of compute. So let's call compute CO we have done here. Then we'll value C dot radius is equal to some value here is equal to 10.5. Let's call this is what is the value that we have assigned to here. Then what you will do, we'll write CO dot calculate. Then when we will write it down, then we will just pass the instant of it. Then we will write return 0, and then the program has been successfully comes to an end here. Okay, am I clear? Is this program is being clear? Is this program
Yes,
is clear to everyone? That means how can we pass it as an argument? So within, so when we passed it as the argument here, let's call C is equal to here. That means we still be able to access the member variable and also the member function as well. Okay, so is this clear to everyone?
yes, sir.
Okay, very good. Okay, then we will go to something called as a private access specifier. So the class member declared as private can be accessed only by the function inside the class. That means they are not allowed to access directly by any object or the function which is being placed outside the class. So which is also going to tell that only the member functions are allowed to access the private data member of a respective class itself. Okay, so is the definition, the three statements which has been written over here, that is what is being translated into an into a code here. So the same code which you have referred it with respect to the public access specifier, so the same thing which we have done it here. So in this case, earlier what was been there, the radius was being declared under the public access specifier, but in this case what you have done, so we have defined the radius under the private access specifier. So as per the definition here, whenever any object is going to be created for the circle class, we won't be able to access the radius data member, so which has been written over here in the main function. So in the integer main function, so we have created an obj here, which is nothing but a object of type class called as the circle. Then when we try to write obj dot radius is equal to 5.1, so this is what is the area, or this is what is being the segment on which the code has went wrong, because the radius has been defined under the private access specifier. Then this the cout function will work out, because the compute underscore area is a member function which is being defined in the public access specifier. So this statement will holds good, but this is the one will never holds good. That means the compile time error will happen in the in this statement itself. Okay, so is this code is clear to everyone?
Yes, sir.
Okay, then how to overcome such challenge? So let's call unless until you define or you assign some values onto the radius, then this function will not work out, isn't it? Because it may take some garbage value. So garbage value can be any arbitrary value, isn't it? So how to deal with this kind of a challenge, and how to overcome such challenge? What needs to be done here? Okay, then what is the what has been done here? So we have tweaked the code here. So the code which has been written over here, we have just tweaked it. So as a part of the tweak, what we have done, so the compute area which is being the function which is being defined under the public access specifier, so we are passing the value as an argument to the function itself. So then it is what we are going to return 3.144 into R here. Okay, then we will just create an object of the class called as the circle. Then we will invoke the function which is being called as compute underscore area. Then whatever value for which we intend to calculate the area, then area of a circle, that is what we will just pass it on, and this is what is the way by which we can achieve the solution. Am I clear? Is this clear to everyone?
Yes, sir.
Why the boys are silent today?
Yes, sir,
What?
clear.
Okay, it's clear. Now tell me, is there any other way by which this the problem can be solved? Is there any other way that this problem can be solved?
Sir, using this,
What is this?
sir, the get this R equals R with the public sorry, with the private R, we can pass it and store it.
Okay, any other thought? What is the other way this problem can be solved? So the first way what we have looked at is by passing it as an argument here. Suppose we do not wanted to change the definition of the function here. We want the compute underscore area to be as it is. So how this can be solved here? What is the other way to solve it?
Use a set radius function.
Huh?
Uses set radius, another function which takes the argument and sets the radius.
Yes, possible, yes. So we can define another function which is being called as the input. That input function which will allow the user to give the input, then based on it we will do the calculation. Am I correct?
Yes,
Isn't
sir.
it? Isn't it? So that means this input function will be private or is going to be public.
Sir, that is going to be public.
That means you are allowing the object to again first call the input function, then followed by the compute underscore area.
Yes, sir.
Isn't it? Is there a better way? Okay, the rest of the students, if you could not able to understand, okay, so I'm just writing down the piece of code here. Okay, what he has talked up now. Can I erase this? Do we need this or can I rub it?
Sir, a bit.
Okay. So what he is trying? So he is trying to tell that. So we will define another function called as, let's call void input. In the void input, then we will be specifically asking the user to provide the value. So let's call, we will write cout enter radius. So then what we will do, then cin is the one which will use by which radius will be calculated here. Then in the main function, what you will do, in the main function what you will do, so we will just create a object of it. So let's call circle c is the object which you have created. Then what he is telling that we need to just call the input function here. Then what needs to be do, we need to call the compute underscore area. Isn't it? This is what you told the boy student, this is what you have told. Isn't it? This is what is the
Yes,
another,
sir.
this is what is being the another way. Is there a better way of doing this? What is still a better way? What is the other way? Let's forget about what better. What is the other way apart from passing it as an argument? What is the alternative way?
Sir, we can define a constructor.
we have not studied constructor at this point of time. Okay, so whatever has been studied so far, so you let's focus the answer onto those area. We will again discuss this when we will be discussing a constructor. Okay, any more answer please? Okay, so here is the call. Do we need to write this function? Can I do something like this inside this? Isn't it? This is what we
Yes,
can
sir.
do it. So in this case, we do not need to write a function here.
No, sir.
Is this also clear? So in such a cases, so this is what is being not required here. Is it clear to everyone? So that means this piece of code is being not required here. I'm just writing it down with a multi-line comment statement, because so in the compute underscore area itself, so we are being taking the value from the user, and based on it we are being just calculating the area out of it. So is this being clear to everyone?
Yes, sir.
Girl side, is it clear?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so for an example, suppose you define the input here. Okay, let's call, you believe in segregation of the responsibility. So you still define the void input here. Does it make sense to define it under the private? Does it make sense to define it under the private? And when this is needs to be done something like this, can't we do something like this?
So we can.
Still this is possible?
Yes, sir. This is possible.
Am I clear? So that means there are multiple ways this problem can be solved. The question which I have marked is that, so this is the three or four ways which we have discussed now. So is it clear to everyone?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So with this we are done with the private access specifier. Okay. Then the protected access specifier. So the protected access specifier, it is what is being similar to that of a private access specifier. The difference is that the class member which is being declared as a protected are inaccessible to the outside world, but they can be accessed by any subclasses. So what is a subclass? A subclass is nothing but a class which is being derived from another class. So when we will be studying the concept of an inheritance, then we will be discussing what is meant by the base class and what is meant by the derived classes. So only just for the time being, so you just need to know that the protected access specifier is going to be the similar like private access specifier, in which the object can't be able to access it. But there is only one exception. The exception is that if any derived classes, okay, will be able to access it only when the public classes, the derived classes are being inheriting from the base class. Okay, so how to this is just a example on the protected access specifier. So for which we have we have created a class called as the protected access here. Then under the protected label we have defined something called as the index, and also we define something as a display function here. Now when we create a object of the protected access here, so using that object the x will not be accessed, which display function also will not be accessed. So this is same as that of a private access specifier which you have discussed. Now how this can be done into the derived classes, that we will be discussing when we will be jumping up into the inheritance structure. Okay, So till this point, is it being clear to all of you that three different kind of a access specifier?
Yes, sir.
Boy side,
Yes, sir.
okay. Now what we need to do, so we need to focus on a concept which is being called as the memory allocation for classes and objects. Okay. Now we need to remember something here. So let's go through this. The class is not allocated any memory, which is partially true. But what it is trying to tell here is that the function in a class are allocated memory which are shared by all the objects of a class. Only the data in a class is being allocated memory when an object is going to be created. And also each object has its own memory of data member variable. Now what this is trying to tell it here. Now, what this is trying to tell here is that, so let's call you define a class here. So in the class, you have defined the two member function, which is being called as member function 1 and then the member function 2. So what this diagram is trying to represent it over here is that, so this member function 1 and then the member function 2, these two member functions will be common for all the objects. That means the byte code, or let's call the executable or the binary code or the low level language code, is going to be created for the member function 1 and also going to be created for the member function 2. So that means when a class is being created, the memory is not allocated for unless until the object is being created. So this is what we have discussed it. But the fact is that when a class is going to be, I mean, it is going to be created, the memory will be allocated not for the class, but however it will be allocated, it will be created for the functions. If the class is having any member function, then for those member functions the memory will be allotted, and after that whenever multiple objects are getting created, the binary code of the member function 1 and the code of the member function 2 is going to be common for all the objects here. That means it is also been telling that the memory is being created whenever the function is being defined. Okay. Second point, what it is trying to tell. So the second point, it is telling that if a class is having member variable, then the number of objects which we are going to create. So when the objects are being getting created, each of the member variable will be assigned with the memory. Each of the member variable will be created by the or will be allotted memory by the operating system itself. So that is why it is trying to tell. So if the class is having two member variable called as member 1 and the member variable 2, then for the object 1 it will have their own copy, for the object 2 it will be having their own copy, then for the object 3 it is also going to have their own copy. So that means what this is trying to tell, this is trying to tell is that for the member variable, that means the memory will be allocated, so when the objects are going to be defined here. Okay, so the memory for member function is allocated only once when the class is defined. Therefore, a single copy of a member function is being shared among all the objects here. Okay, so is this concept is also clear to everyone? Is this concept is also being clear to everyone on the memory allocation for classes and objects?
Yes, sir,
Yes,
clear.
sir.
Okay, very good. Now what we will do, the way we have discussed something called as array of integer or array of float or the array of character, in the similar fashion we are also going to discuss about the array of objects. Okay, so let's go through this. Like array of other user defined data types, an array of type class can also be created. So that means earlier we have written integer, then arr, then the bracket. In this case, what has been happened? An array has been created with the inbuilt data type. So in such a cases, it has become a integer. So the way we have created for the inbuilt data types, in the similar fashion, the arrays are also going to be created for the user defined data types. So the array of type class contains the object of the class as an individual element. So thus an array of a class time is also known as a array of object, and an array of object is being declared in the same way as an array of any built-in class type. Now let's look at it, what it is trying to tell here. So assume that, so this is a circle is being created here. A circle object, it is called a circle, is being created here. So how do you create an array in C? So let's call, this is what you will do, something called as ARR here. Okay, assume that you have defined something n here at a globally. So that means in this case, this ARR becomes a array, and the elements of each of the array is going to be of type integer. Similarly, we can also define something like this. So circle, then C, then also we can define something like this. So in such a cases, the zeroth index at the array called as C is going to represent the first object which has been created. Then the first index is going to be treated as the second object which is being present in the specific array itself. Okay, this is what I mean, this one is trying to tell it over here. Okay, then the syntax for declaring, so we'll just go through the syntax. The syntax of declaring an array of object is being called as the class name, then what is the name of the array, then you need to provide the size of it. Okay, so is this, the points is being clear? Actually, the on the conceptual level, what is clear, that what is meant by array of objects?
Yes,
Is
sir,
it
clear.
clear?
Yes, sir.
Okay, then what you will do, we'll just go through a code here. Okay, so example of array of object, we will just go through a code to understand that what has been happened here. Okay, so what we have done, we have created a employee class here. So this employee class is having a private access specifier. Under the private access specifier, there are three member variables. The first one is being called as ID, which is of type integer. The second one is being called as the age, which is of type integer. The third one is being called as the salary, which is of type long here. So this is what we have been created under the private access specifier. That means when the objects are going to be created for this class, those objects will not be able to access the member variable which is being defined here. Then subsequently what has been happened, so we have defined something called as a get data and also a put data function under the public access specifier. That means when the object is going to be created, those objects will be able to access the get data member function, and at the same time they can also be able to access the put data member function. Then what has been defined under the get data member function? It is just only taking the employee ID and storing into the ID. Then in the second one, this is also being taking the employee age, storing into the age member variable. Then in the third statement, it is flushing it out to the user to enter the employee salary, and then the salary is being getting stored here. That means, so this function is being exactly working like a input function, in which the data is being getting collected from the user, and after which it is what has been stored into the data member which has been defined here. Then we will go into the put data function. In the put data function, what has been done here, so we are going to display the value which is being associated to each of the data member itself. So that means we'll just write it down, what is the value of id which has been possibly entered with the get data function. So similarly, what is the value of age which has been inserted or which has been stored with the get data function. Then what is meant by the salary? So this is also being, I mean, this is also going to display the salary which has been inserted with the get data function itself. Okay, so now we have defined the employee here. Then subsequently what we need to do, so we have defined a integer variable called as I here. Then we are going to create an array of object. So e is being nothing but an array of object, and the size is also being defined here. So we are just going to create an array of 3 employees here. Then what are you going to do? Then for I is equal to 0, I is less than n. So basically for each of the objects we are trying to call the get data function. So when this function will be called up, the 3 data member variable called as id, age and the salary, these will be the data will be taken for those data member. Then when we have successfully read the 3 objects, I mean, because this loop is being going for 3 times, that means in such a cases all the data has been successfully populated into the array of object. Then once the data population has been done, then what you will do, we will just write up a for loop over here. So this for loop is just going to flush it out that what was the value that has been entered by the from a user, or maybe by you when you are going to develop the program. Then lastly the return 0 statement which has been written over here itself. Okay, so is this program is clear?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Remember this code will not work because we have not written the header file as not included, and the namespace is also not included. So what we need to do, so this is just to explain you on what is meant by the an array of object. But if I'm going to share this code with each of you, then what you will do, you need to ensure to add the required header file and also with the namespace. Then this code is going to work here. Okay. Okay. So this is what is being the example of an array of objects here. Then the next one is something called as the how the objects can be passed as a function argument. So we have seen in the earlier cases that the objects are going to, I mean, the function can, the values can be passed as a by value and it can be passed as a by reference. So in the similar fashion, the object of a class can be passed as an argument to member function as well as to the non-member function either by value or maybe by a reference here. Now we are encountering a new a new convention here, what is being called as a non-member function. So the difference between a member function and between a non-member function is that, so when a function is being associated to a class, it is what is being called as a member function. When a member function, when a function is not associated to any class, this is what will be called as a non-member function. So let's look understand it with an example here, that what is meant by the member function and what is meant by the non-member function. Okay, so let's call, this is what is the function which you have written it here. The same thing over here. Then what we can do, I can write a something called as a function here. So let's call, I will write something called as void, then compute, isn't it? So let's call, this is what we have written it here. So remember this, the compute function which has been written over here, it does not belong to any class. It does not belongs to any class. Then what you can do, I can simply write it down, the code which has been written over here. Then what you can do, we can simply call the compute function here itself. Is it clear on what is meant by a non-member function?
Yes, sir.
Is this clear to everyone? What is a non-member function? So this is what is trying to tell it here. So the object of a class can be passed as an argument to a member function as well as to a non-member function, either by value or it is going to be by reference. So when an object is passed by value, a copy of the actual object is being created inside a function. The way we have seen that, the formal arguments and the actual argument, a copy is being getting created in the similar fashion also. When it is going to be passed as a value, a copy of the exact of the object is being created within the function or inside the function. Then the copy is being destroyed when the function is going to terminate here. So that means, let's look at it with an example here. So the class name O1, O2 and O3. So these are the three arguments that has been created here. So that means, we are going to call something called as a function name here. That means we are passing something called as a O2 and then O3 here. That means when this function is going to be called up, a copy of O2 is going to be created and it is what will be represented by ARG1. Then a copy of O3 is going to be created and this is what will be represented by the ARG2. That means when the function will come to the execution of this, ARG1 and ARG2 will lost its scope. That is what it is going to be created. That means the copy is being destroyed when the function terminates it. Moreover, any changes made to the copy of the object inside the function are not reflected in the actual object. That means using ARG1 or using ARG2, if you have done any changes into the data member, then when the function terminates and when this program control come back to here, then the changes value will not reflect, because this is nothing but a call by value. That means and a copy of the object is being getting created. So whatever changes that has been happened, it is happening to the copy object, not to the actual object. Okay. So on the other hand, in pass by reference, only a reference to that object is being passed to the function. So that means the memory. What is a reference? It is nothing but a memory location. So when the objects are going to be created, these objects will take some memory. So when it is going to be called by the reference, then the copy of the object is not passed. What is being getting passed? It is nothing but the memory location or the memory address in which the object is being stored in the main memory. So that is what has been told here. So therefore, when the function is being expected to do or to work it out with a by reference, so since the reference or the memory location of the object is being passed there, if a function has made any changes, then those will be reflected here. So that means, assume that the O2 and O3 are being passed as a reference here. Then in such a cases, whatever changes that you might have done onto using ARG1 or maybe using ARG2, so that will persist as soon as the function has been come over here as well. So therefore, the changes made to the object within the function are also being going to reflect in the actual object as well. Okay. So is the definition is being clear, or the concept is being clear on what is meant by the object as a function argument?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now
Yes,
what
sir.
we will do, we will just look at the two examples here. Okay. So we'll just look at the few examples here. So in this example, what has been done? So we have created a class called as the weight here, and in this class, so we have something called as a kilogram, and we have a something called as a gram here. These are the two data member which is being defined or which has been declared under the private access specifier. Then the second thing, so under the public access specifier, so we have defined three member function. So the first member function is being called as get data, the second member function is being called as the put data, and the third member function is being called as the sum of weight. And this sum of weight is being internally taking the arguments of the same class type. That is what you can see. So this is weight is nothing but going to represent an object of class called as the weight, and this is also going to represent the object of the class called as the weight here. Okay, so in this case what we have been done, so we have written only the function declaration. So the function declaration has been done here. Now the definition of the function, which we prefer to do it outside of the world itself. So then the outside of the world, what we have done as a part of the weight in the get data, we'll just printing it down. What is the kilograms here and what is the grams here? That means these are the two member variable are there. For the two member variable, we are just reading the data from the user. Then finally, what is meant by the put data? So by using the put data, what we intend to do here is that, so we are being trying to, trying to flush it out that what is the value which is being associated to the member variable called as kilogram, and what is being very as accessible to the gram also. Okay, now we'll come back to the weight sum of weight function here. So in this case what has been happened, so this sum of weight function is being taking the two arguments of type class called as the weight here. So weight of w1 and then weight of w2. So these are the two weight object this function is being taking as an arguments here. Then what you will do, so we are just calculating the gram of w1 plus w2 of gram here. Then what is the kilogram? The kilogram is being nothing but the gram divided by 1000, and then the gram will become a gram, then the modulus operator of 1000 itself. Then what you will say, the kilogram is nothing but equal to w1 of kilogram here plus w2 of kilogram here itself. That means the two objects are being getting added up, and the value of this one is being getting stored into a third weight object itself. Then what you will do, we have created the three objects here, w1, w2 and also with the w3. Then we are just one by one we are taking the weight in the kilogram and in the grams for w1. Then we have taken up something called as a w2 here. Then what we are trying to do, so we are just trying to call the function called as the sum of weight here. So when we call the sum of weight function over here, then we are just passing the w1 and also with the w2. That means in this case this is what has been called as a call by value. That means the w1 and the w2, the copies will be created, and this is what will be passed on into over here. Then when the calculation has been done over here, then we will just try to figure it out that what was the weight that has been given to w1. So we'll call the function called as w1 dot put data. Similarly, what was the weight for the second one, then we will simply call the function w2 dot put data. Then the third what you will do is that, so that means this third weight is nothing but the summation of the two weight objects here. So that is why it will say that what is going to be the total weight here. So then we will be simply calling the w3 dot put data here, and this put data function which will called up here, and which is going to specify that what is the value in terms of the kilograms and also in terms of the gram itself. Okay, so is this function, is this program is also clear?
Yes,
Call
sir.
by value. Okay. So this function, this is the similar function which we have discussed in C. Then what you will do is that, so we are going to something called as a call by reference. So in this same example has been taken over here. Okay, the weight class which we have discussed in the call by value, the same thing has been done here, but the only difference is that in the sum of weight, we are doing it by the call by reference here. So that means the call by reference we have already said already, then this is what is the one which needs to be specified here, by which the reference or the memory location of those objects is going to be passed as an argument to this function here. So that means the rest of the codes are being remaining same. So the code which has been written over here, so this is what has been exactly the same. The only difference here is that, so this sum weight function is being defined something like this, and the definition is also being defined something like this. Otherwise both of them are being the same. So this is what is the way by which we can pass the object as a reference. Okay, is this clear? Is the
Yes, sir.
program is clear to everyone? Boys side, is it
Yes,
clear to
sir.
everyone? Okay, very good. Then we will discuss something called as a function returning object. Okay, so we have seen that a function is going to return something. It may return an integer, it may return a character, it may return a double, or it may return something. In the similar fashion, a function is also going to return an object here. Okay, so let's look at it over here. So in this case, what has been done here? So there is a class name. The name of the class is being called as class name here. Under the public access specifier here, so we are being passing by a call by value here. So let's call an object is being called by the value here. Then essentially what we are trying to do, so we are just creating another object, doing some computation here. Then internally what we are trying to do, so we are being passing the object here. So that means this function is being returning an object here. So that is why the return type of the function is also being written, that what is the class type. So in the this one it is being called as the class name here. Then what we have done in the integer main function, what we did, so we have created the three objects of the type class name O1, O2 and O3. Then O1 dot function name which you have just called over here, the O2 dot here, and then this is what is being going to return a O3 here. So you can see the arrow mark here. So this O2 has been goes an argument into the ARG1. Then the return obj which has been come across, so an arrow mark which is being written over here. That means this object is going to be a part of the O3 here. Okay. So is this pictorial depiction is clear to everyone?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay, then we will go through an example, okay, to understand that the function, how can it return an object here. So let's look at it. So currently, I mean, this function is being trying to add a complex number. So there is a class which has been defined here called as the complex, and this class is going to have two member variable. First is being called as the real part, and the second one is being called as the imaginary part. Then we have a read data function which essentially reading the data from the keyboard itself. So that is why it is saying that enter the real and the imaginary number respectively. Then the real and the imaginary one has been getting created from here. Then what we are trying to do, so we are trying to define a function here which is being called as the add complex number. Then this function is being returning an object of type class called as the complex here, and this function is also being taking a argument of type class complex. Okay, then what we have done here, we have created something called as a complex temporary. A temporary object is being created as a part of the complex here. Then what we are doing, we are just trying to furnish the real value, and also we are trying to furnish the imaginary value itself. So that means the current object real value plus the object which has been passed as a argument here, that is what is going to set for the real value, and the temporary object dot imaginary value is going to be the current object imaginary value plus the plus the this object imaginary part of it. Now when the real and the imaginary part has been successfully populated with the computation here, then this object is going to be returned to the caller of the program itself. Okay, so this is what has been done. Then finally we do have a display data function. So this display data function is going to flush it out that what is the value which is being associated to real and also with the imaginary part. Then what you will do, so we have created the three objects here. So the first object is being called as C1, second object is C2, third object is C3. Then for the C1 object we are reading the data, for the C2 object we are reading the data. Then again on the C1 object we are calling the add complex numbers function by passing the a object of C2 here. Then eventually what is being this is doing, this is eventually creating an object of type class complex, and this is what has been getting stored in C3 here. Then as soon as the storing of the real and the imaginary part has been done with the add complex number function, then we are again calling another function which is being called as the a display data. So this display data function is going to flush out the real part and the imaginary part which is associated to the object called as the C3 here. So then once your the steps are being done, then we are just returning a value of 0 here. Okay, so is this part is also clear?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so what you will do is, so in the next class we will discuss about something called as a static data member, static member function, static object, then the friend function, friend class, and then function with a default argument, function overloading, nested class, local class, this pointer, and then constant member function, constant object. Okay, so this is what we are going to discuss in the classes to come. So when is our next class? When is our next class, or we are done for this week? Are we done for this week?
Yes, sir. For this week, we are done.
Okay, so then in the next week we'll continue to have our discussion into the remaining portion. Okay, thank you very much for attending the class. Okay, I'm done.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Okay.
Sir, attendance.
Okay, if I am not taking the attendance, this means that I am marking all. If I am taking the attendance, then I will mark the students who are present and I will not mark the students who are absent. Am
Thank
I
you, sir.
clear?
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Okay.